Hi there, and welcome to Personalization Point, Episode 2, Personalization at Scale. My name is Becc Holland. I'm the CEO and founder of Flip the Script. Before we jump into the content, if you do me one tiny favor, go to flipthescript.co and make sure you download the deck for this session. It's really meaty, and I want to make sure that you have it in front of you for each step of the way. Once you've done that, let's go ahead and jump in. So let's start with a bit of an agenda. There are going to be 4 pieces to today's session. The first part, we're going to go into what to personalize on. How can I pick a premise about someone that really makes them want to respond to me? Number 2, we're going to go into how to personalize over email. Number 3, how can you personalize over a call? And then number 4, the million-dollar question that's probably my favorite question, how do I scale the approach? How do I scale this? How do I make sure that my reps are getting out enough emails? How do I make sure they're getting out enough calls? And how do I make sure that they're not hiding behind research, but we're still getting the juice from the squeeze from the orange? So let's start out with picking a premise. There are 5 different buckets of premises that you can tease out about your prospect on LinkedIn. Full disclosure, that's usually where I'm getting most of these premises, but I've ranked them in descending order of where I see the highest trigger rates down to where I see the lowest response rates from my prospects within the history of whenever I've done it. So I've done this with 3 teams now. The first team within 2 weeks saw 4x results. The second team saw 3x results. And the third team and most recent team saw 6x results in a month of what they were booking beforehand. Let's start with the first bucket. First bucket is going to be self-authored content. So this is going to be anything that your prospect authored themselves. Anything that they wrote, anything that they said, anything that they posted. So I put 3 options here, but basically webinars, articles, posts, videos, things that they've done where they have been the sole contributor to the content. So there's going to be one question I'm asking myself after this session. I'm going to be walking around here wondering whether I was relevant to you. I'm going to wonder whether you got a lot from the session, whether you enjoyed the session, whether you thought it was digestible, whether you thought my dance move in the beginning was stupid. Those are the things that I'm going to wonder after this session. And your prospects are too. They're going to wonder when they're doing some kind of content, whether it really hit home with someone. So this is actually the predication of social media. Social media proved to us one thing, 2 things actually. Number 1, that most people want to be famous. And number 2, that we are extremely validated by others' approval. So people like likes, they like comments, they like engagement. They get kind of haughty whenever something goes quote unquote viral because they know that attention is the real capital in today's day and age. Attention is the one thing that you want. So it's like influence. You know, I've even heard the phrase, all press is good press, because attention is a very valuable asset in today's day and age. So with self-authored content, when your prospect wrote something and whenever they posted something on LinkedIn, whenever they wrote an article, they want engagement from people because they want people to focus on them. They want people to focus on their work. So this can have anywhere from a 90 to 95% response rate. I've even had I can't mention the company, but a strategic company, senior vice president, respond to me in 3 minutes because I sent her a message that was about referencing something that was in her self-authored content and got the meeting within a 3-minute window. So self-authored content, anything that your prospect wrote. Second bucket is going to be engaged content. So this is going to be anything that your prospect liked, shared, or commented on, but didn't author themselves. A little bit weaker of a response rate. If I had to guess why, it's because the person who wrote the content was the hero and not necessarily the person who commented on it, but it's still pretty high. It communicates to your prospect that you know them, that you're following along, that you're focusing on them, that you aren't just a mass blast rep out there that's just shooting off messages to 500 people, but that you are focusing on something that you've done, like, shared, and commented, especially if the comment is meaningful. The third bucket that you can use is self-identified traits. This is profile line on LinkedIn, headline or company line, but basically anything someone wrote about themselves. So in the onset and nascent stages of LinkedIn, people were logging onto LinkedIn and posting their job experience because they viewed it as a resume. They viewed it as a way to online communicate to people out in the market what they've done, their accomplishments, and their work experience. Really, the value deep down was, what if I want to make a job change? What if I want to hire someone, etc.? Then I need to have this online profile. Because of that inception, when they were filling out their LinkedIn profile in the very beginning, they had an about section, they had a title section, which I would call your headline, and then they had a company line where oftentimes they would talk about things that they had done, whether that was, results that they had seen, team size that they had led, markets they had sold into, things that they're good at, things that they focus on, places where they excel. But they were basically trying to put information online because they viewed it as a way to communicate to the internet and to anyone who wanted to view all the things that they had done because it might be beneficial in the long term. LinkedIn has evolved quite a bit. It has turned into a online community. Who really knows the boundaries, right, in the ambit direction at this point? But really, from my perspective at least, it has turned into a community where people can share different content, where they can keep up and socially listen by scrolling through, understand what's going on with other people, understand different opinions. It has often become a kind of a soapbox where people come and express all the different things that they're thinking. But in the beginning, because of that inception, most people filled out their profile accordingly. They wrote something in their about section, they wrote something in their company line, they wrote something in their profile line that's communicating what they focus on, and this can be a treasure trove of information because of that reason. You might not be able to find something with self-authored content, you might not be able to find something that they've engaged and liked with, but if they're on LinkedIn, typically they will have something in bucket 3. So as an asterisk mark with all of these buckets, you want to be very, very careful about doing what I call the 10-80-10 rule, where 10% is personalized, 80% isn't, and 10% is personalized again. Because what that can come off with alike is this. Hi, Becc, I noticed that you run Flip the Script. We over here at, Drift help with convert website views into close one business. Give me a shout on how to do that. When I'm reading that email, all I'm thinking is, yes, I do flip the script. I do run Flip the Script. How does that connect to what you do in this email? How does that connect to Drift? How does that connect to your company? How does that connect to Okta? What is the relevance in there? And so a lot of prospects know that people are personalizing in today's day and age because they know it increases conversion. I've even seen platforms that do this, that say, hey, Becc, notice you're based in, the Bay Area. How's the Golden Gate Bridge? And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't build it. I don't really care that much. Like I care and I don't care. So you want to make sure that you hook whatever personalized premise is into what is relevant in the second line of the email. A lot of people on social media think that you can either be personalized or you can be relevant and that you should only focus on one. They think that you can be relevant and that disregards personalization, or personalization and you disregard relevance. So you'll see some people saying personalization doesn't work. It's not the most important thing. And I agree with them to some degree. Personalization without relevance means nothing. It means that the person will like you. It means that they know that you focus on them for a tidbit. You might get some responses, but personalization without relevance, and they won't buy from you because they don't think that you can help them. But relevance without personalization, you might get some deals, but you probably won't be very different to your prospect. You won't stand out. You won't say that thing that really, earmarks something in their mind. And so this is a really nice low-hanging fruit of not having to be the gimmick person on the phone and say like, hey, I noticed that you did that. I noticed that you dropped by our booth. Did you come by because you wanted the Kush balls? You don't have to be a salesperson anymore because you just did something different that most reps don't. You researched the person, you figured out who they were, and you said something that they did in specific. So I think tying these two together is very, very important. So full disclosure, when you're thinking through one of these buckets and which premises you want to use, you can't just use some random article that they wrote. You have to think through the mechanics of your head of how can I relate that article back to what we do in terms of value prop. When I'm typically viewing personalization, I give the analogies to teams that I've worked in the past of the movie Apollo 13. In Apollo 13, they're on a mission and something goes wrong in the movie and in real life case scenario. And the team on Earth needed to build something for that team in space and wanted to figure out how they could teach them to do it. So they said, okay, this is our goal. And there's one scene where they walk into a table and one of the guys who's the head of NASA shakes out a bunch of materials and says, this is our goal and what we need to build. These are the things that we have on deck that we can do it with. So you want to view personalization like that, because personalization will really get a hold of your prospect's attention in all the right ways. You don't have to use GIFs anymore or GIFs anymore. You don't have to use all these, sleazy hooks or these things that you say to someone, that really gets them in the bucket. You have to say something about them. So it's a really interesting way to say, okay, this is all the self-authored content they've done. This is the engaged content they've done. And this is the self-identified traits. This is the bucket of what I have to work with. I can build a filter with the following items. How do I connect the dots for the prospect? If I can't find anything within these first 3 buckets, typically for the teams I've worked with in the past, anywhere from 80 to 85% of the premises that we're hunting are in these first 3 buckets. So I wouldn't take it so easy on yourself. Anything that is really high quality, you have to put a little bit of labor of love into it and start thinking outside of the box so that you can get a hold of someone's attention in a really, really genuine way. But if I can't find anything in those 3 buckets, I move on to what is called the junk drawer. The junk drawer is an affectionate term that I term for all of the things that people are doing or saying about themselves on LinkedIn that aren't necessarily really business related. So these aren't your heavy hitters in terms of what they focus on, but these are schools attended, personal interests, hobbies, recommendations, skill endorsements, etc. But these are kind of the lighter things to people. So recommendations and skill endorsements are business related typically, but they aren't the real heavy hitters whenever you're talking about getting a hold of someone's time. So I've never looked at someone's profile on LinkedIn and said, oh, they have 78 people who says that they can sell. So they must be really, really good at selling. Sorry, LinkedIn, if you're watching. But it is a good earmark of like, if you can't find things in bucket 1 through 3, okay, then I'm going to move on to this junk drawer. Full disclosure, some buyer personas really, really like this. Some don't care for it so much. So marketing is a great example that like this, because they're usually on the DISC profile scale, a super high I, and they like kind of a little bit of the more fun, creative side of things. HR, half of sales leaders love it. Half of sales leaders don't like it so much. So I'm actually someone who doesn't love the junk drawer. SDR leaders really, really like the junk drawer. So this is a great bucket where you can get super creative of like, I just noticed that my prospect really, really likes to grill. I sell a conversation intelligence software. How am I going to make that hook? I'd probably come up with something like this. Hi, Mike, noticed that you were an aficionado of grilling. When it comes to grilling, it's all about highlighting the best flavors. What if you could highlight the best flavors of your sales conversations, build more rapport with your prospects on the phone and have more close-won deals as a result. So that's kind of an off-the-hook, example, but you get the point of I'm never going to tell someone what to say, but I do give a couple of rules of direction of like, these are the rules of engagement, but you guys become super creative. And so the junk drawer, I've seen people get really creative. Even had a rep once that said like, hey, I noticed that you're a gardener. Good gardening, from what I've experienced, comes down to pruning, how you prune the tree. What if you could prune the worst parts of your sales conversations out, and only focus on the good and double down there and close one more deals, have more close one as a result. So super interesting direction. I didn't come up with it. The rep did. So I said, hey, here's the junk drawer, get as creative as you can, but that's what the junk drawer can be used for. And then the last bucket that you're going to see the least conversion, more conversion than you would if you weren't personalizing, but the least conversion in terms of the personalized premises you can hunt is any kind of company level data. So if I had to guess why, it's because what matters to that person and what matters to their company are 2 different things, and usually they're higher priority. Or at least I can only speak for myself that I am. Just kidding. Anywho, company level data, M&A, posts, blogs, hiring, website language, anything about that company. My biggest recommendation here is you have to give some kind of detail that couldn't have been. I want you to put on the lens when you're writing these emails of, if I were reading this email cold, would I think this email is personalized? So if you're going to take the time to personalize, you're taking the time to do something that 99.9% of reps haven't done. So you want to make sure that your prospect knows that you were personalized. So there's a big inclination I've seen of reps of they say something like, hey, I noticed that your company is growing. If I see that email, your prospects are really smart. they don't know that that email is personalized because we've tried to send out templates that are like, notice your company's growing. My CEO sent me your way. On and on and on, so that we can get out quantity without having to actually personalize. So if you are going to do this at company level data, I used to bring my reps in the morning and say like, hey, I want you to sit here in this chair and watch how I go through my Gmail in the morning. The first thing I do is I sit down, I refresh the page, I watch it implode, and then I start pruning out every single email that I can recognize from the title that isn't directed to me. By the first 3 words, first 4 words, or the title that I'm like, oh, this isn't to me in specific, this isn't to me in specific, etc. And I am no different than your prospects. Your prospects, the number one thing that they don't have enough of is time. And they want to save their time by cleaning out anything from their inbox that isn't directly sourced to them. They're master delegators if they're a leader. They're a master saver. They want to save their time at every single clip. And so they're going to come through in their email and say, all of these things don't need a response from me because all of these things were not personalized to me. So you want to make sure that you say some level of detail of like the difference between saying your company is growing, and I noticed your company grew 38% over the last 6 months and just added a director of sales enablement. One, I'm not sure that you personalize. One, I am. So I want you to put on the cap, put on the lens and the glasses of, if I were the prospect reading this, would I be sure that this was personalized to me? Full disclosure, very big asterisk mark here. I've seen a lot of personalized emails that are way too long. Way too long. So you want to keep brevity in your mind of your prospect, especially if they're a decision maker. The higher and higher I've climbed in my career, the shorter the emails have gotten for me. Not because I don't like to talk a lot, because I don't have the time. So full disclosure, when you are personalizing, you want to say something, one line that stood out to you, one line about their website that really pulled you in, etc. But please do not Charles Dickens it and go on for a novel, because that will, even though it captured your prospect's attention, you have a very limited time frame. I want you to think of former President Barack Obama, and you've got the next 30 seconds to say something to him. So be very calculated in how you say it, but be extremely personalized in the way that you do. Second section. So now we know how to pick out a personalized premise, but how do I work that into emails? Where do I put it? And how do I make sure, above all, that I don't lose consistency among my reps? One of the biggest fears I've heard of personalization is that I would open up my reps to do anything that they wanted to do, and that I lose consistency of messaging. They might say something that's not true. They might say something that might offend someone. And so I'm going to restrict them to templates only because I'm worried about that. So I want you to ask yourself in your mind, I know that templates are nice in terms of I can, restrict I can restrict the boundaries. I can make sure that everyone's saying the same thing, etc. And I can also make sure I'm on brand in terms of buyer persona, etc. But I want you to ask yourself, if you're watching this video, how often do you respond to an unpersonalized email by taking a meeting with a vendor? Number 2, do you think your prospects are different than you in that regard? So if you're like me and you're like anyone that I've worked with, typically we don't respond to any unpersonalized messages by taking a meeting. And I certainly don't think the community is different. So you want to make sure that you're not asking your reps to do something that wouldn't work on you. So for the structure of the emails, we're going to keep in mind that we need to maintain the structure, especially for enterprise companies. We need to maintain the structure, consistency of messaging, and buyer persona so that we don't just go off the trail, but we also include some level of personalization. So how we can do that is this. I defer to the Chuck Jones theory. Chuck Jones, or what I call Chuck Jones theory. Chuck Jones is the creator of the rules of animation. Very, very creative guy. And I want you to think Wile E. Coyote, Roadrunner, and Acme. He created that show and the rules behind how you should animate. He's known as the father of animation. And Chuck Jones, his dad, was an infamous, terrible businessman. So he was from Portland, and his dad would, true story, get a job. He would put the name of the company on pencils and put the name of the company on the paper that he had. And then whenever he would get let go 6 months later, he would give that pencil and give that paper to Chuck Jones and his son and say, just use it up. Use it up in any way that you can. So Chuck Jones started drawing. And that at the end of it, he was known for drawing up to 200,000 drawings. And he said that after 100,000 drawings, instead of thinking about the drawing itself in specific, he started thinking about the rules of which the drawing was falling underneath. So when I create a head, it should look like this. Or whenever I turn an animal into a character, it should look like this. Or a beak should be this size. But he started thinking about the structure and systemization of a drawing over the actual quality of the drawing itself, or before the actual quality of the drawing itself. That helped him speed this up and understand how he could at scale start kicking out drawings, include some creativity, but also, stay to some level of standard. So whenever he started Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner, he hired an entire team of writers. And he knew one thing. He was super creative, but that wasn't scalable. He needed to hire super creative people, but still keep them in some kind of direction and some kind of consistency so that every episode didn't look different because a different writer had written it. So he basically hired an insatiably creative team of writers, and he gave them 9 rules to stay within for every episode, but they could do whatever they wanted within those 9 rules. So I do the exact same thing for emailing. The 9 rules that Chuck Jones gave are up on the board. I hope that you've downloaded the deck and you can read them right in front of you. But some of my favorites are the Wile E. Coyote is always humiliated more than harmed. Rule number 9, I believe, 9. And rule number 8, whenever possible, you should make Wile E. Coyote's biggest enemy gravity. So whenever I think of Wile E. Coyote in those episodes, the first thing I think of is him walking off of that canyon and then falling down because of gravity. That was his biggest enemy. But Chuck Jones didn't write that episode. Someone else did. You want to do the exact same thing with your SDRs and with your self-prospecting AEs. You want to say, I know that the answer here, part of the answer and part of the piece of the puzzle is personalization, but I also value keeping them on brand, keeping them on message, A/B testing these things, and understanding how can I be really, really effective within emailing. So I give them rules to stay within, which I'll go into in a second, but then I say, push the creative boundary, do whatever you want, just stay within these rules. The rules go like this. The structure of an email should have 4 lines. The first line should be the longest line, and it should be all about the reason for your outreach, and that reason for outreach should be a personalized premise to that person. So Google did a study on how you read emails on your laptop, and what they found was this. You start at 2 o'clock within the email, and then you read clockwise. So what that tells you about how your prospects read your emails and how you read emails on desktop is you start at 2 o'clock at the end of the first line. You then loop around to the end of the last line. You then loop around to the beginning of the last line, and you then fall into the middle. So what that tells you about how they're reading and what they value is they want to know who you are, and then they want to know what you want before they want to know anything about your company. When I talk to marketing teams and sales teams, the number one thing that they think about is them. Their product, their feature set, their value prop, their competitive differentiators, their battle cards, them. But your prospect isn't even reading that if you don't entice them to by nailing the who you are and the what you want. So actually your least valuable real estate, regardless of what company you work for, is the thing that you probably have been striving towards the most in terms of quality. So you want to refocus that quality on them. So the reason for outreach is not because my name is Becc and I'm with Verizon Wireless and we're awesome and we're the number one blah, 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 blah. This is the things that we do. Your reason for outreach is your prospect. something your prospect, you want to refocus all of that energy, something your prospect did, said, engaged with, wrote on their LinkedIn that really wrapped you in and communicated to you that they might find value in buying your product. So you don't want to just base on buyer persona that typically sales leaders really, really like this platform. You want to say, yeah, that's part of it. But you also said this thing that makes me think that we might be able to speed something up for you or give you some kind of value that you don't have currently today. So this first line is going to be the longest line. It's going to be the reason for your outreach, and the outreach is going to be all about them. The second line is going to be the body. This is going to be where you map your company's value prop to the premise of your outreach. So very, very important that it is mapped to the premise of outreach. Again, personalization without relevance, or the 10-80-10 rule, at least in my experience, comes off pretty disingenuous, and that your prospect will think, that's great that you know that I'm near the Golden Gate Bridge, but it doesn't really matter to me in my day-to-day. Unless I'm building bridges, which I'm not. Unless I'm building bridges, then it's not relevant to me. So you want to make sure that you pick a personalized premise that you can relate back, and then you map that to your company's value prop. Full disclosure, I go into, if you want to know more about that, go into season 2, and there is a session on how to hook personalization to relevance. This is really, really tough to do on paper, meaning easy in theory, really, really tough to do. And so I unpack a structure on how you can do that and what you're looking for and how to make it easy, breezy, and systematizable. The third line is going to be your CTA, short for call to action. The CTA is where you communicate to your buyer what you want. I would be direct in this line. I would not soft CTA them. I don't really like that, is this relevant to you? Or, the soft CTAs where you're trying to kind of warm up into it, or, did you read the ebook? Oh, what did you like about the ebook? Oh, did you have any questions about the ebook? That's not why you came there. And best case scenario, you're going to confuse your prospect. Worst case scenario, they're going to know that you're trying to bait and switch them into another topic. So the CTA, you want to be very direct. Request one time to unpack the content that was mapped above. Again, everything is personalized. So if you talked about building rapport with your buyer, or you talked about, better security, or you talked about, my end-to-end platform, et cetera, you want to be sure that you very, very briefly map that into the CTA of what you'd like to discuss on Tuesday. Your buyers aren't wondering whether their calendar is open Tuesday at 2. Your buyer is wondering whether you can add value to them. And if you can add value to them, how can you add value to them? And if you can do the if and how, then they're wondering what the details are of what they're going to cover in that meeting. When you're calling into a decision maker and you're calling up the chain, again, the one thing they don't have enough of is time. So they want to evaluate this meeting, not, and I'm giving you some time as a reward. They were evaluating whether I should give you this meeting on, can you do something for me that I didn't have before? So in this onset of building this business, of Flip the Script, that's how I'm evaluating conversations. Will giving this person the time and them giving me the time back further both of our realities? And if not, we can pull the meeting. So your CTA, you want to ask for one time where you briefly talk about, what you would cover in that meeting. But this should be your shortest line, so you need to keep it brief. And then the last line, I go into what I call the push-pull technique. The push-pull technique is basically where you give your buyer reprieve at the end of the email. So you want to communicate to your buyer that if they give you what you want or they don't give you what you want, either way, you really, really like their work. The worst thing that you can do is tell them that you read this article and then ask them for something, and then when they don't give that to you, ghost them, because you communicated them two things. Number one, you'll only show up whenever there's something in it for you. And number two, that your personalization was disingenuous. So you want to give this reprieve on the back end of your emails, the last line where you say, either way, keep the good articles coming. Big fan of your team over at Okta. Be genuine if you are a big fan. And hope you're safe and sane with everything going on in the world. This is a great place where you can include COVID language, where you can include pandemic language. So I go into a lot of different pandemic topics in season 2. That's actually the theme. But this is a great place where you can include that language so you're not mentioning it at the beginning, so people think you're monetizing a pandemic and it triggers pattern recognition by your buyer. And but you're not mentioning it at all. So you're putting it in here in the push-pull line so that they're aware that you're aware that there's a pandemic going on, and regardless of whether they give you the hour, you're still excited about their work. So now we know the structure of an email, but how do we maintain consistency even within the wording itself? So I put together a litany, a laundry list of attractive pillars of messaging, of things that I want my reps always to aim for, and then 7 deadly sins that I want my reps to never say. So let's start with the pillars of attractive messaging and work our way backwards. I started with the first pillar is going to be the pillar that I see least often done well in the industry, and then we'll get down to the ones I see actually included pretty regularly. So let's start at the top. So the first pillar is going to be prospect-centric. Sounds pretty easy to do in theory, really hard to do in practice. It's pretty simple. Just make every word out of your mouth be about them. You want your email to be about them, not you. So even in terms of social proof, if I'm going to say social proof, I'm not going to say we work with LinkedIn. Everyone seems to work with LinkedIn, Spotify, and Yelp on a side note. But I'm not going to say that we work with LinkedIn. I'm going to say we work with companies like you in terms of size, for example, LinkedIn. So whenever you're using social proof, for instance, there's 3 things that could go wrong. Number 1, you're mentioning a company that's too big, and this company is like, oh, well, we're too small, so we wouldn't fit into that bracket. Number 2, you're mentioning a company that's too small, and they're enterprise, and they're thinking, yeah, okay, you help this small organization, but can you scale it to the size of IBM? And then the third one, you never know when your prospect has a negative aversion to a brand. I'll give you an example, and then we can move on into pillar 2. I am from Dallas, Texas. And I love the NBA. So my team, naturally, is the Dallas Mavericks. I love the Dallas Mavericks. I was obsessed with Steve Nash in high school. I went to all the games. I went upper deck and then snuck my way into lower deck because I didn't have the money to go there, to attend a lot of games. But I absolutely love the Dallas Mavericks. I now live in San Francisco. So their team is the Golden State Warriors. And the Golden State Warriors have done really, really well over the last few years, which is really, really annoying to someone who loves the Dallas Mavericks, not the Golden State Warriors. Everyone in San Francisco talks about it, how awesome the team is, and oh my gosh, Steph Curry and the little shimmy thing that he does, or I don't even know what it is, but everyone loves the Golden State Warriors in that city. I can't stand them for that reason, because I love the Mavericks and that's my team. I got a prospecting email once after the Warriors clinched the finals, and basically someone reached out to me and said, hey, Becc, Golden State Warriors just won the finals. That's so awesome. What if we could turn all of your B players into A players, or like the bench into the starting lineup so they can crush it like the Golden State Warriors? I think this guy talked well about the Golden State Warriors for 7 different lines, talking about how awesome they are and how Kevin Durant is on the Warriors right now, how amazing Steph Curry is. And all I'm thinking is Kevin Durant used to be on the Oklahoma Thunder, and I actually loved him there with Westbrook, and I thought that was a Cinderella team of the NBA. And then the Golden State Warriors stole him and took him over to their already overloaded club. That's my heated opinion. I didn't know I was going to go that long. But when this guy sent me that prospecting email, he had no idea. And how could he know? How could he know that I didn't like the Golden State Warriors? So when you're using social proof with your prospects, you never know if they like or don't like a company for some niche reason. And so whenever you're mentioning it, you always want to couch it for them. We work with companies like you in terms of industry. We work with companies like you in terms of size. We work with companies like you in terms of funding round, in terms of product sophistication, etc. For example, this company, because you want to make every single line about them. The second pillar is going to be pain-centric. You always want to make sure that you focus on pain alleviation over pleasure add. This is going to drive urgency with your buyer. So if you are talking about all the wonderful features that are like, glamorous, and add things, you're not talking to the majority and the lion's share of your market, because the lion's share of your market is going to be running into a lot of pains and seek to alleviate them. We're in a pandemic right now. People are doing layoffs. People are doing budget cuts. People are doing all sorts of things that they never envisioned that they'd have to go through. And so instead of talking about this whipped cream thing that your product does, you need to constantly seek to understand your buyer, what they're going through in their day-to-day, and how you can alleviate pain over add pleasure. The third pillar, my favorite pillar, is going to be pride aversive. So if I were to tell you the top 15 things upon meeting you that I did well, if I were to say, oh my gosh, like, you know, nice to meet you, my job's awesome, I do this really, really cool thing, you know, oh, my nieces and nephews love me, and, you know, I'm just romantically swiping left or swiping right, like I'm just shooting them down, there's flowers that are headed to my house all the time, I feel like I'm in a rom-com half the time, my life is awesome, and I'm awesome in it. I want you to time out and ask yourself if you like me in this moment. If the answer is no, I do not blame you. When people talk super, super well about themselves all the time and talk about the top 15 things that they do well and that they're awesome because they excel at all these things, people naturally in their ego state and their psychology are repelled by it. They really, really don't like it. The number one thing that I hear about people is that they don't, about people working with others, is they say that person has an ego. That person is arrogant, and it is the most unattractive quality to someone whenever you're working with them. So whenever you're reaching out to, you know, I think marketing, the difference between marketing and sales, you know, marketing you can put on a billboard, we're the number one thing. A salesperson saying we're the number one thing. The difference there is one is, you know, one to many, one is one to one. So marketing can do that on a billboard and say we're the number one platform. But if I'm communicating that to you in person, over email, over cold call, naturally someone, you know, reads the billboard and is okay with it. But then when they're talking to you, all of a sudden they don't really like it. So pride aversion, you want to focus, if you're going to give pride to anyone, give it to your prospect. You know, don't go over too much, but if you are going to focus on the great things about anyone, don't let it be about you. Let it be about them. So there is no one that does this better. I want you guys to blow him up on social. His name is Mark McWaters over at Ambition. Ambition is an incredible company and an incredible team. And Mark is the token of humility. Whenever I hear him talk, he is always talking about you, asking you questions, you know, pumping you up, saying this is the thing that you did well, super encouraging, and he's a heck of a leader because of it. So that, to me, in my head, he is the marquee of like, I'm not going to focus on me, I'm going to focus on you. And because of that, I think that Mark is amazing because he focuses on other people. So deep down, I'm like, I want to talk to Mark because of how pride aversive he is, because he focuses on like me in the conversation all the time or whoever he's speaking with. So there's two pieces on how you can do this. The first is passive submission. So basically having prospect fandom, focusing on all the amazing things about your prospect and being a big fan of theirs in the game. If you're in sales and you're not a fan of your prospect, you're probably not going to be that successful. You need to be a fan of your prospects before you're a fan of yourself and your own team. So you need to be all about them, not all about you. But this is a good way to do it. And then you can even take it to another degree if you really want to get in there of proactive humility. Proactive humility is not drowning on about in a fake manner about all of the things that you do horribly and I'm awful. But proactive humility is simply admitting the things that are true that you didn't necessarily do well so that your prospect knows that you have self-awareness. So we all do wrong things. We mess up all the time. Just ask the filming crew who's filming this right now. They can give you thousands of ways that I messed up in the last 24 hours. So I'm like, you mess up, and I wouldn't, again, drill it home, but I would give a couple of examples of that, of like, if someone isn't responding to your email, it's not because they're a bad person. It's because you didn't write a really compelling enough email. Own that. Tell them. When someone picks up the phone and says like, hey, this is Mark, and you're like, oh my gosh, my heart starts beating really, really quickly, and then, I freak out and rattle off some value props, and then that person hangs up, call them back and tell them that. Hey, Mark, I just want to apologize. You picked up the phone and I wasn't expecting it, and I blacked out, and I said all this stuff, and I almost support you hanging up on the phone with me. With your permission, though, I did actually have something that I wanted to say to you. Would you give me the next 20 seconds to give you my best dog and pony show on why I originally called you before I blacked out to see if there's a fit between you and I? So admitting those things about ourselves, I think that deep down we think it makes us look weak whenever we admit these, but it actually strengthens the game. Now, everything in balance. So I don't want you, or I wouldn't suggest going to LinkedIn and spreading a lot of vulnerability capital and just talking about all the things you do awfully all the time. But I think sprinkled in can make you absolutely deadly in the sales room. The fourth pillar is fluidity. Really, really easy to do in your head, really, really tough to do in practice. So it's very, very, it's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. Connecting the premise to the body to the CTA. One quick tip that I have here for reps is if you are reading the message and it's pretty muddy, you're probably multi-value propping. You're probably saying the top 3 things that you do as opposed to the top 1. So I would suggest, if I may, picking one thing that you do well, picking out the personalized premise, hooking it to the value prop with one thing you do well, and sticking the landing in the CTA. But if you are multi-value propping, it can come off as a little bit, disjointed and muddy to your prospect. So fluidity is probably where I spend the breadth and lion's share of my time with reps and with myself. You should be able to read this message and say like, oh, this message, I get it, if you are a prospect outside. So I can't remember who said it, but I thought it was a really great analogy. Your email should be like when you are walking up to a reception area and you see a candy dish and there's Tootsie Rolls in there, and you grab the Tootsie Roll, you roll off the paper, eat the Tootsie Roll, and throw the paper away. That's what the email should be like. Easy, breezy, light, connected, makes sense, all about them, and you can stick the landing. Got it? Number 5, relevance. Again, personalization does not alleviate the need to be relevant. It enhances it. So whenever you pick out something about your buyer, I would spend my first 90 days at any organization getting to know the buyer, whether that's going to the case studies that were written, whether that's going to, the people over an NPS score, whether that's finding people who are in the role that you sell into, and talking to them about their day-to-day. I would find out who my different buyers are, know that there's nuances between each one of them, and figure out what they particularly struggle with, because the more you know that, the more you know how to pitch your product into the email. Number 6, brevity. I'll be brief, wink. Never use 7 words when 4 words will do. And number 7, noticeability. This is all about getting the attention of your prospect in the subject line without making them feel bait and switch. So one of the most viral email campaigns of all time had a subject line that said, pictures of your wife cheating on you. And when you opened it in the email, it was talking about a weight loss campaign, that if you didn't lose weight, then your wife was going to cheat on you. Went absolutely viral, and people were furious because it bait and switched of like, anyone can get an email open with the title free puppies. But is the point getting an email open? I know that it's a piece of the KPI, but it certainly doesn't lead to conversion. So there's good attention and bad attention. I have experienced both whenever I've been emailing. So I would encourage you to say like, okay, I'm going to have the integrity to really focus on this person in this line. I'm going to send them over some kind of, subject line that's really, really about them, customize your comment on LinkedIn, et cetera, et cetera. And I go into that in a different session of what titles or subject lines look like. But the goal here is to be noticeable and to be different, but not to be absolutely irrelevant to the body of your email. So now we know the 7 pillars of attractive messaging. Let's talk about the 7 deadly sins. So number 1, these are the things that I have geared my reps away from doing in the past that has helped put them into a different stratosphere of messaging. Number 1, being too casual or too silly with your prospect. I'm an anti-GIF girl for anyone who's watching. Sometimes they work for people, but to me, you always want to lead with respect to your prospect. Whenever you dole out respect to someone, it's a very, very attractive quality. So I'm from Texas. When people hold the door open for me, it innately makes me want to respect them back and say thank you so much and be very, very polite. So you want to do the same thing with your prospects. I know the goal here. The goal here is that you want to pattern interrupt and that you want to be different. But you want to be very careful about being silly, because a lot of buyer personas, especially if you're selling into someone higher up the chain, and especially if you're selling into someone technical, They really don't like the rigmarole in the game. I don't know if rigmarole is a Texas word, but they don't like that whole game. So you want to be sure that you are different, but you are not silly to someone. So if I were to meet former President Barack Obama, I know I bring him up a lot, or if I were to meet Michelle Obama, then I would show up on time, and I would err on the side of formality over the side of being too casual because of how much I respect them. So if I were to meet Jack Dorsey, if I were to meet Anna Wintour, the CEO and chief editor of Vogue, I would show up at probably 8 a.m. for a 4 p.m. meeting, okay? I'm absolutely obsessed with her. And so at this point, like with your prospects, you always want to button it up, be different, but make sure that you aren't silly with them, because it can communicate at the base level that you don't respect them accidentally. So sending over gifts is a no-no. Leading with, hey, Anna, as opposed to, hi, Anna. You know, it's slight, but it's a little form of casuality. Someone called me dude yesterday when they were prospecting into me. Delete. So you never want to treat your prospects with disrespect. And then number 3 that I put up here is the dreaded list. The list is, I've seen people send over emails that say, you know, hi, Becc, reason for my outreach is, you know, I haven't heard back from you, so you must be off on an island somewhere, drinking pina coladas, not value data, or just being mean and don't want to get back to me. So the list, for anyone out there, if you're using this kind of list, number 1, everyone knows that it's going on. So it's kind of like pattern recognition at this point. But number 2, it can communicate to your prospect all the wrong flavors about you. So be different, but be different for the right reasons. Number 2, wasted text. Wasted text is a plague in the industry. I know you're busy, but just want to follow up. Just want to circle back, just want to bubble this to the top of your inbox, just. I'd love to, happy Monday, on and on. If you can scratch through that, any line in your email and not lose any value to the email, I would suggest doing it. So number 1, these things, your prospect, the one thing they don't have enough of is time. And if you are putting in lines like this, you're wasting essentially their time in the beginning. And number 2, it's the most valuable real estate of your email. Again, people are going to look at 2 o'clock first to wonder who you are. So if you're filling in with those words, I know that they sound nice on paper, but people who are a decision maker typically want you to just get to the point, be very polite, but just get to the point. The reason for my outreach is I saw you wrote this article. The reason for my outreach is I saw you said this thing, you know, X, Y, and Z. Number 3, being the authority over the prospect. If you haven't checked out the session on ego states, I would suggest doing so on the 3 ego states and which one to be selling in to get a hold of your prospect. But whenever you command someone or you're the authority over someone, it innately triggers an ego state in them called child adaptive, which basically makes them want to rebel. So if I command you to say, be there at 9, or go do this thing, or do not touch this button, the first thing that everyone wants to do deep down in their psyche is touch the button. So you want to be very careful about commanding someone unless they answer to you. And even then, I would, you know, put some kind of language of like, be direct but polite, but you definitely don't want to command your prospect. So again, these can be very, very slight, like let me know, or starting the email with their first name as opposed to saying hi and a prelude in there. So it just says Becc, comma, and I think I'm like in trouble with the IRS. Or saying, I'd be happy to give you a demo. I'd be happy to do something that's beneficial for me. It communicates that you're the one doing the favor and that they're the one receiving that favor. So if you're pitching your product, if you're following up, if you're giving some kind of proposal, the favor is towards you, them to you. So I'd be very careful that you stay away from commanding your prospect in any regard. Number 4, questioning your prospect's authority, congruent with number 3. But asking people if they're the decision maker, or saying at the end of the sequence if they haven't responded, I guess you're not the right person. Both of them, you know, can trigger all of the wrong feelings within your prospect. So if your prospect is the decision maker and you ask them if they are, they're going to think, yeah, but so what? Would you not be talking to me if I wasn't? You know, do you not value an intern? Do you not value the little guy, etc.? Am I only worth it to you because I have money and status? And if you're not the decision maker, you're either going to A, not tell the truth, or B, deep down, even if you do tell the truth, feel disempowered. So we want to empower our prospects. We want to make sure that we focus on them, that we give them all of the validation in the world. I know that we're after the insatiably valuable information of, are they the decision maker? Because it's very, very valuable to us in the selling process. But we want to avoid asking that question specifically if it's right off the bat within the nascent stages of our conversation, because it can disempower them and make them feel invalidated and not want to talk to you. Number 5, making your prospect feel not okay. I've, a couple of examples I've put here, but telling them, I've emailed you 7 times. I left you a voicemail. Did you get it? I sent you over something. Did you get it? Where you're basically blaming your prospect for something, and inherently makes them not want to respond because they feel like they've done something wrong and you're guilting them into something. Number 2 is mudslinging against your competitors. We all have competitors. We all don't like them. Okay, so I will sum it up with this. What Sarah says about Sally says more about Sarah than Sally. So when I'm saying negative things about anyone that actually communicates more so of where I'm at than who they are. So you want to be very, very careful with the words that you say, and be sure that you never talk mudsling against competitors in specific, but I would argue anyone. I would argue that you should be saying positive things and asking direct questions, but you don't want to talk poorly about anyone, because it communicates to the person that you're talking to that you might do that about them when they're not in the room. Number 6, glorifying yourself. I think we've hit this pretty heavily, so I'll be pretty brief here, but saying we're the, best whatever sales engagement software out there. We're the number one X, Y, and Z. Everyone seems to be number one in their own mind, and I've seen several different conflicting ads for conflicting platforms saying they're number one. Who's the real judge? I don't know. Number 3, social proof, where you're the hero. When you're telling the story about your prospects, or telling the story about your customers, and you're talking super, super well, make sure that you're talking super well about the prospect, not yourself. You're simply the tool. You're simply the thing that they use to overcome their goal, or to achieve their goal and overcome the hurdle that they were running into. But you want to make sure that you are always talking about how amazing your customers are, because then your prospective customers think, that's how they're going to talk about me. That's how, I want to be that person that they're talking well about. Number 7, and this is the last sin, is making your prospect feel stupid. Asking them, and again, it can be very, very slight. So, I've sourced this list, and the genesis of this list are things that have been done to me and things I've done on other people and been successful. So asking people, do you know what we do, at the beginning of the call, or asking them the classic question that makes me cringe every time it's asked, does that make sense? So every time this is asked me, I think yeah, it makes sense, and I get super defensive. A good way and quick tip to ask this is saying, am I making any sense, versus does that make sense? So what you're calling into question is your ability to communicate, not your prospect's ability to understand. So that's it for email. Let's go into cold call. For cold call, where you can personalize is up front is, hey, this is Becc calling on a recorded line with Outreach. How have you been? And they say, I'm good. Who is this? And I say, that's a great question. The reason for my outreach is I saw you wrote this article on LinkedIn where you were talking about scaling teams effectively. One line that stood out to me was, it all comes down to the words you say. So I was curious to know if you've come across outreach before. So basically, right at the beginning of the call, I know we're talking about personalization today, so this is where you personalize, is right off the bat. When the person asks you a question at the front, and they will ask you all kinds of questions. Who is this? Who are you? Is this a sales call? Wait, what? What did you say? You're on a recorded line? Or, are you the person who competes with this company, or X, Y, and Z? I would always say, that's a great question. The reason for my outreach, and you would deliver the personalized premise. The reason being, before any people, if you are sitting there in your seat and scorning me and saying, not answering the question isn't a good idea, the goal of saying that's a great question and moving on is that you want to deliver to them the message that you know who they are. So short term, it's easier to just say, yeah, we do compete with them, and here's a couple competitive differentiators, and here I go on my entire pitch. But then they don't know that you did the one thing that no one else does. You found out who they were and you were calling in reference to that reason. So you want to say, that's a great question. The reason for my outreach is I saw that you wrote this article. I saw that you said this thing. I saw that you liked this thing on LinkedIn, because short term, it's easier to skate through and ask their question, but long term, it's better for you to get the meeting or to close the deal that they know that you're different right off the bat. So you want to make sure you include the personalization here. For more on, then I would go into the prospect pack. There are 4 pieces of a prospect pack, and I go deeper into cold calls in core session 2, which is over the cold call infrastructure. So if you want to know more on the back end of this call, then go to that session. But there are 4 pieces to what I would call the prospect pack: commitment, agenda, outcome, and consent. And what that sounds like is this. I know I'm going quickly, but I would go to the cold call section if you want to see more in core session 2. How about this? You give me the next 20 seconds to give you my best dog and pony show on who outreach is and why I thought we might be a good fit for you and your team over at, Seismic. At the end of that 20 seconds, you tell me whether it makes sense to continue conversation from there. Is that a deal? So again, you just want to give them, your prospect, the commitment of what they have to commit, the agenda, the outcome of that prospect pack, and then ask for consent. So you're asking for the permission to pitch right off the bat, so you don't have to go super quickly, and so they're not upset whenever you're talking about who your company is. Another pact that I use is what I call the prospect pack for a 2-question fail-safe. This has higher conversion on the back end, but it's tougher to do, so I would start with option 1. But basically, there's the same 4 pieces: commitment, agenda, outcome, and consent, with a little bit of a twist. I would say, how about this? Let me ask you 2 questions, and if after I ask those 2 questions, I'm still not relevant to you and your team over at Seismic, I promise my next call won't be unannounced. Sound good? So same type of structure, but you're asking for the outcome of being able to ask 2 questions versus giving an elevator pitch, so to speak. So that's how you personalize. Within emails, it's in the first line. Within cold calls, it's right off the bat. That's how you pick out a personalized premise. But how do I scale it? How do I scale it? That is the biggest question that people talk about on LinkedIn when I'm talking to them. Yes, I know personalization is great, but how on earth do I scale it? The first question I ask, and I have to ask if you're watching this video, is what do you want to scale? I have a hunch. My hunch is that what we want to scale is results, and what we've ended up scaling as an industry is volume. Volume of calls, volume of emails, because we thought that was one of the indicators that would get us to scaling results. Volume is a very important lever. Volume is a lever that you need to pull and make sure that your reps are sending enough messages. However, in my experience, the first company that I started personalizing with, I cut them down from 100 cold calls and 50 emails per day, all the way back to 10 emails and 20 cold calls per day. And in 2 weeks, we 4x'd our results. So you want to be monomaniacal and not lose sight of the thing that you're trying to scale is outcome. So I know that volume is a piece of that, but you have to, from the depths of my heart, I'm trying to communicate that quality is another big piece of that. And so we need to find a world where we can intertwine both. Make sure that they're calling enough and make sure they're pushing the needle and working hard, but also make sure that they're spending some of those cerebral calories on figuring out what the best premise is and figuring out what the buyer persona messaging is and figuring out how to hook the two. Because if you don't have the quality piece and you only have quantity, you're going to have to bump your quantity so high to where it blasts out your TAM. People don't want to talk to you because you're the mass blasters and you don't inherently get the result that you want. So I'm going to reference back to that question before I move on of ask yourself, before we move into this portion, ask yourself if you have responded personally to a unpersonalized email by taking a meeting within the last year. And if so, how many times? And the second question is, do you think your prospects are different than you in that regard? So if you've taken a lot of meetings from unpersonalized mass blast emails, tell me who you are in the comments because I'm going to blow you up with a bunch of templates to book some business. But if you're like the majority of the industry, we're not responding anymore. So the first question I would ask before we go in how to scale this approach is what do you want to scale? So all eyes should be on the prize in the following section. Hold me accountable if it's not. But what do you want to scale? And we're going to take the outcome of increased meetings and increased quota attainment as what we want to scale, not increasing the volume. So the first way that I scale it, I'm going to give you, this is a great sheet. I hope that you've downloaded the deck. This is a great sheet for all of the different sequences that I'm running. So I am running 15 sequences, shell sequences, personalized sequences for every single team that I'm running. Starting with cold outbound is the last sequence. And you can read all the other different efforts here. But this is my entire comprehensive playbook. And I am building these sequences not based on buyer persona, because we're not in templated messaging, but on basically attribution of scenario in different plays. So the plays that I've come up with are the following. I've divided them into 2 buckets. Bucket number 1, where you would mention the premise, and bucket number 2, where you wouldn't mention the premise. And then in the blue are leads that were sent over to you by marketing. And in the white are all of the efforts that you would just do because these are important to sales teams and can increase buyer intent. But point being, let's start with bucket 1 very briefly here. These are all the sequences that I had assembled on my team. Content downloads, event attendees, webinar registrant, high value MQL. Maybe they viewed your website or opened enough of your emails to where they MQL'd outside of these initial efforts. Executive churn, User Gems is a great platform for this. If you call Trinity and Christian, amazing team too, where you can track if this person has used outreach and I'm working at outreach at one of their companies, and then they churn to another organization, which is very likely in tech, that they are probably a really low-hanging fruit as a buyer. You know, if they really liked your platform and they've used it in the past, you don't have to do a ton of selling. Then you get the meeting really right off the bat, and you can close the deal because they've really used your platform and found value in it. Firmographic triggers through Crunchbase like hypergrowth. Common VCs to where you and your prospect share a common VC, and common VCs to where your prospect and one of your customers share a common VC. Sounds crazy and like I'm out there on a line, but that sequence I actually didn't believe in and worked really well. Demoed in the past, you can sequence this, and LinkedIn engagement, you can sequence people who are engaging with your LinkedIn content. That one takes a long time, full disclosure, because you have to list build and pull out all the companies and etc. No one reached out to me with their value prop of how you can do that more quickly, but low-key do, but I'm not going to take a demo. But if you can monetize LinkedIn, but these are all of the sequences that I am mentioning the premise, where I'm saying, hey, I noticed you downloaded this content, but more importantly, and give them a personalized summary. And we'll go into that in a minute. But this is all of the sequences that I'm running, shell sequences that I'm building, where I'm mentioning the premise. Bucket number 2 is where I wouldn't mention the premise. So we have website views, dark funnel leads like G2, 6sense, and Bombora. G2 in specific is really good. If people are looking for reviews on your software, which they're looking for those now more than ever, G2 can feed that lead back to you, or at least tell you what company it was researching. Firmographic triggers like company funding, IPO, email opens, and then I have cold outbound here. I put these in the bucket of don't mention for usually one of 2 reasons. Either number 1, it's pretty creepy, like they've come to your website and they feel a little, interrogated or intruded on. If you're going to mention it, I would mention, or I would suggest using what I call classic role diffusion, where you call out the sleazy thing of what someone typically in that role would do before you do it. So it doesn't come off like you're self-unaware. Like, not to be a sleazy, creepy sales rep, but it looks like that you have come to the website, etc. Is a good way to do that. Company funding is a great example of one that I wouldn't mention the premise. Just because they have money does not mean they want to buy your product. And then you're reaching out saying, hey, reason for my outreach is I noticed you have money. Do you want to buy my shit? Because I sell shit for money. I know it works in our head, but doesn't really connect the dots for our prospects. So these are the 2 buckets of the entire comprehensive playbook that I'm running. For bucket number 1, if I have the premise that I'm going to mention, again, I mention it, I transition with the words, but more importantly, and then I go into a personalized outbound premise summary. So what that look like is this. Hi, Ed. who's over at Seismic. Hi, Ed. Reason for my outreach is I noticed that you watched the video on personalization at scale, but more importantly, I saw that you wrote this article the other day wherever you're going into scaling effective teams and thought it was really great. If you don't have a post-bound premise summary, meaning you're in bucket number 2, this is for someone who viewed your website, for instance, and you have sequenced them, but you don't want to mention that premise because it's really creepy. I would say, hi, Ed. Reason for my outreach is I saw that you wrote this article, do a personalized premise summary on scaling effective teams. One line that stood out to me was, it all comes down to having great conversations. So I'd give them an excerpt in this example. So either way, you're going to have 2 pieces. You're either going to have the post-bound premise summary, or sorry, I'm like weathermanning it. Even though it's not a green screen, people. It is not a green screen, okay? Post-bound premise summary, but more importantly, and giving them a personalized summary or a personalized summary and saying one line in specific and giving them an excerpt. The fun part about scaling it, I'm going to showcase outreach today. They were insatiably good to work with whenever I was starting to customize and personalize at scale. 7 minutes is all it takes. 7 minutes, and you can go to the custom tags if you're using outreach. Shout out to anyone who's using outreach. Go to the custom tags. You can hit edit, and you can build in all the space to these personalized premises in 7 minutes that are then on every single prospect view. So if you want to speed that up and you're like 7 minutes is too long, like I'm Bill Gates and I don't want to bend over to pick up the 100, call them and tell them you want the Becc Holland special and they will iron this in for you. But basically, I'm putting all of the personalized premises in here where it says like, for instance, it's like self-authored LinkedIn article excerpt. So my reps, instead of throwing it all in notes and being super confused whenever they, see it, I mean, when you're talking to someone on the phone, like you're going to have to do it really quickly or it sounds inorganic. So this is a good way to structure where they know where they're going to put in the detail. And the great thing about this is, number one, they don't have to use Google Sheets. I have had reps hunt all these premises and then throw them into a Google Sheet. Great in scenario, but what happened to us was basically the prospect picks up the phone. You only get 3 or 4 connects per day. You're caught off guard a little bit, and all of a sudden you're like, "Hi, Ed. The reason for my outreach is." Hold on 1 second. It's over on a Google Sheet and you can't find it very quickly. So you can build it into outreach to where not only can you see it right off the bat, the great thing about outreach is when you fill it in, that they only surface to the top the fields you filled in. So you don't see a bunch of blank boxes. You only see the ones for the premises you've entered. But number 2, how many people in here have called someone and they didn't pick up on the first call? Okay, this is for you. You only have to research once. Throw it into outreach and you're done. So I had the reps hunt 3 personalized premises right off the bat to fuel the rest of the sequence in under 5 minutes, and then they're done. So to the people who are scared about them over researching, I go into a session in season 1 where I talk about how to do that quickly in under 5 minutes, but I'm surfacing all 3 personalized premises in under 5 minutes and throwing them into outreach, and I never have to research again. So how I build sequences for personalization, I go into this deeper in sequences and how to build personalization in, but essentially what I'm building is a shell sequence where I'm dictating the type of action and the timing of that action and the medium of that action, but I'm not really over communicating what that actual template is. So I'm building in some language in there for infrastructure, but I'm not actually saying all the things that they should say. The structure of a sequence goes like this. I, again, hope that you have the deck in front of you, but there are basically 5 different pods of outreach that I'm doing. There's 16 steps over 21 days. I'm heavier on the back end here than I am on the front end. I'm doing a LinkedIn research as step 1. I'm doing 5 cold emails and 10 cold calls. So there's 5 pods. Pod number 1 starts on day 1, cold email, cold call, cold call. Pod 2 starts at a 6-day delta from your first pod, business days, by the way. Cold email, cold call, cold call. Pod 3 starts at a 4-day delta on day 13, 13, and 14. Cold email, cold call, cold call. I think you're seeing a pattern. Pod 4 starts at a 3-day delta. cold email, cold call, and then you finish on pod 5 immediately. So cold call, cold email. So basically you're warming up throughout the sequence so that you get to know your prospect in the beginning. You're sending over personalized premises so they know who you are and they know you as the person that knows who they are. And then near the end, you start to get more aggressive. So you make sure to sidestep the reality of your prospect thinking that if they just wait long enough, you'll go away. But you basically are heating up near the end to where they get to know you. And then they're like, okay, if I don't answer this person, like they're not going to leave me alone is the feel. For more on the text of those follow-up emails, there's a session in season 1 on follow-up emails where I go into the text of these actual emails. So last slide here, and then we'll close up. There is a way to require quality, not request it. I love standards. I love holding myself to them, and I love holding others to them. Because standards, that's how you make someone better. It's a pain in the butt on the front end, but if you really love your reps and you really value your own career, you're going to need to put in standards early and put in standards often, and not just request them and ask for someone maybe to do something if they want to, but actually require them to do that. So require that quality. So if I had a slogan, it's excellence without compromise. Like if I didn't hit it the first time, I'm going to do it 17,000 times until I did at least, get it in the right realm. So as far as personalization, there is a way where you can basically lock your reps out from calling someone unless they know something about this person. So I've done this with a lot of my teams. They didn't like it in the beginning and they thanked me at the end. So, within those custom tags, there's a way within Outreach that basically if they haven't filled out enough fields, it opts them out and disables them from calling that person. So I get it, if you're like, okay, this is just too much, like I just can't do that to my reps. But I will say, at least in my experience, it's worked really well. And it helped us grow together of like, hey, let's raise the standard for you. Let's raise the standard for me. And I want you to hold me to a whole nother level in terms of leadership. If I'm doing something and not teaching you in a way that X, Y, and Z, then you call me out on it. So I think that this is a good move in that direction. And it's a great move for your prospects because then you're demanding that we know who they are before we reach out. So in summary, I know there's a lot of voices about this topic of, some say you shouldn't personalize at all. Some say you should only personalize, what if you can't scale it? What if you can't systematize it? Like, are reps hiding behind research? But net, I would forget all of that. Your prospects like it. Your prospects really like when you know who they are. Your prospects value when you have put some time into what you're doing. And I think that it's time for a change. I think it's time for us to hold ourselves to a higher degree and a higher standard of sales reps and say, we're going to change into a group of people who is not the prototypical slimy, sleazy, I'm going to jam something down your throat because that's what makes me more money. But I'm going to behave and I'm going to hold myself to the standard of really raising the bar in terms of integrity and saying, I'm someone who's in your corner. I'm someone who's an advocate for you, and I'm someone who knows who you are. I'm someone who has figured out what matters to you in your role from what I think and what the research that I can do. And so you can reasonably trust that I'm going to be after your best interests and that I can guide the difference. I can take you from point A to point B because I know how I can help you. So I know that's tough, but you will thank yourself long-term, I believe. And I think that it's really a really interesting flavor that we can add into the sales community and change the way of how sales is done and change the face of sales. Woo, so that is everything. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. If you like this session and you want to hear more, go to flipthescript.co and you can see a bunch of different sessions that I do on all kinds of different sales topics. If you really like this session, go to Flip the Script on LinkedIn and be sure to tag me in top 2 takeaways so that I know how to better gear the sessions in the future. Either way, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Toodles.